This program is made possible in part thanks to generous donations from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to the Suzanne Atwell Show. Thanks for joining us. Our focus in this episode, Florida's Gulf Coast estuaries. The complex challenges of restoring water quality, the important role bivalves can play, including an exciting local initiative called All Clams on Deck. We start with the environmental state of the state. We're called the Sunshine State, but it's water that really defines us. Estuaries are bays and lagoons where a mix of fresh water and salt water constantly changes as tides ebb and flow. They are among the most productive landscapes in nature. Called the cradle of the ocean, more than 95% of Florida's fish, crustaceans, and shellfish live part of their lives in estuaries, usually when they are young. Unfortunately, 76% of our population also lives in coastal areas. Rivers and streams feed the estuaries, where seagrasses provide food and nutrients. The state of Florida's estuaries is not good. Man-made water pollution is the main culprit. The Indian River Lagoon National Estuary is the worst in the state. Massive losses of seagrass led to the starvation of record numbers of manatees. Over 1,000 died last year, 10% of Florida's population. No question, we have reached a tipping point. There is no single solution. Public water treatment, septic tanks, commercial agriculture, fertilizer runoff, and the list goes on. Fortunately, technology is helping, and with a little help from humans, so can Mother Nature, including clams and oysters. Bivalve shellfish are the marine equivalent to the canaries in the coal mine. Polluted oyster and clam beds are often an early warning to a larger problem. They filter seawater and provide a transformative function within the marine ecosystem. Clams, oysters, and mussels consume and retain nitrogen. According to the University of Florida, a single little neck-sized clam can filter 4.5 gallons of seawater a day. Restoration initiatives around the globe are showing positive results. In New York City, the Billion Oyster Project has restored reef sites across all 5 boroughs, from Coney Island in Brooklyn to the Bronx. Here on the Gulf Coast, a local organization called All Clams on Deck is working to restore seagrass and high-density clam sites. The program is seeking $17.5 million to boost shellfish aquaculture efforts in Sarasota Bay, Tampa Bay, and Charlotte Harbor. Coming up, we'll be talking with All Clams on Deck founder Ed Childs. But first, respected marine biologist, University of South Florida PhD, and Sarasota Bay Estuary Program Executive Director, David Tomasco. We're talking today about the health and importance of our estuaries. Give us an overview of the state of Florida and the Gulf estuaries.
It's a challenging time right now in this state. If we look at the East Coast, it's been 2021 was a terrible year for Indian River Lagoon. We lost over 1,000 manatees. The majority of this extraordinarily bad year is because of manatees starving to death in the Indian River Lagoon. A lack of seagrass meadows, which is their primary food source because of pollution. We're also seeing problems in Biscayne Bay. And in the last couple of years, we've had a couple of issues in Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and Charlotte Harbor that we're working through. So we've had a lot of challenges. It's not particularly, it's not as bad as it was like a couple of decades ago, but we're overall not as healthy as we were, say, 10, 15 years ago.
Compare us with Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor. What do we have in common and what makes us unique?
Well, Sarasota Bay and Tampa Bay both have one thing in common, which is we're healthier than we were 30, 40 years ago. There's no doubt about that. And that's because we did an awful lot about 30, 40 years ago to put ourselves on a nutrient diet. So the nitrogen loads coming into Tampa Bay and Sarasota Bay are down by about 50%. And we've had really good, internationally known success in both of those systems. One of the problems that's happened in Sarasota Bay is, however, we kind of took our eye off the ball a little bit, and we had this good success, but then our population grew about 70% in the last 30 years, and we just didn't do enough to offset, the more roads, the more lawns, the more dogs that poop, the more wastewater that's produced, the aging infrastructure and stormwater.
Yeah, and just several months ago, we talked about the loss of seagrasses and the devastating impact it had on manatees. So what's the latest on that, and how are we getting through the winter? What's going on with that?
Sarasota Bay hasn't had nearly as bad of a seagrass loss as what happened in Indian River Lagoon, but we're about a third of the loss that they had. So we are not happy about that, and we want to stabilize that and improve with more seagrass coverage. And the way to do that, frankly, the first step is to reduce our nutrient impact. And we are seeing some good signs of that happening. Roberts Bay, for example, has shown an improvement in water quality. It appears to be associated with Sarasota County doing a much better job with controlling overflows from some of their wastewater treatment plants. And we think that we're actually seeing some water quality recovery in the upper part of the bay as well. So there's good news on the water quality trend, but it's going to take a while for the seagrass to come back in response to the water quality, because we're down about 2,000 acres, and that doesn't come back overnight.
Well, seagrass seems to be the hue and cry, and I just saw this hot off the press, an opinion piece written by Captain Zach Zacharias with House bills, Senate bills that are allowing for mitigation, replanting of destroyed seagrasses so that development can come in and mitigate it to put it. Is that working? Has it been working?
Well, mitigation is like the third step in the process. When you're developing a shoreline, whether it's a roadway, a bridge, or a dock, there are three things you're supposed to do. You're supposed to avoid, minimize, and mitigate. And Florida's done a pretty good job of restoring seagrass in terms of survival, but the restored meadows are not the same as the ones they replaced. That a really good review done about 2 years ago found that the average seagrass meadow that's created by mitigation is about 40% as dense as the meadow that it impacted. So we're not creating the same thing, and there's lots of reasons for that, but we're not doing acre for acre substitution. We're creating thinner, sparser grass beds, and we're losing grass as a result of that. And we are not creating the same type of seagrass meadows with mitigation as what we are destroying.
And what about major developments? And this speaks of developers. On that end, are we getting the appropriate mitigation? And another thing, mitigation, that word itself, a lot of people do not understand what you mean by mitigate.
Mitigate means there's an impact, and,
Sure.
and basically you're saying it's okay to have this impact because I can make up for it.
Yeah.
And that's really what it means. And there's a lot of mitigation that makes a lot of sense. We need bridges, we need roads, we need public infrastructure, but you don't need to have everyone have access to a dock off of their seawall.
Right.
It's not a need, it's a desire perhaps, but it's not a need.
We're talking about all clams on deck.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
We're supportive of people putting more filter feeders in the bay. We want them to have realistic expectations, though. There's good reasons to put more clams, more oysters in the bay, but Sarasota Bay is 75 billion gallons of water. It's 6 feet deep, on average, and you can't expect clams or oysters to fix the bay for you. They're a good thing. We've paid for people to put them out. We're going to do that in the future, but it's one part of all the things we have to do, and we don't want it to distract from the need for us to go on a serious nutrient diet. The way you turn around water quality in places like Chesapeake Bay, Tampa Bay, Denmark is we go on a nutrient diet. We reduce the nitrogen or phosphorus loads from wastewater and stormwater. We have to make that the primary focus. So we have no problem with anyone wanting to put more clams in the bay, oysters in the bay. We just want it to be realistic expectations of what would possibly be the end result.
Dave is right. There is no single solution. It is going to take public, private, community, and individual efforts to turn this around. You might even say it's going to take all hands on deck, or, as Ed Childs, our next guest, would say, all clams on deck. We're here to talk about your latest initiative, All Clams on Deck. Let's start with why focus on estuaries?
Well, I think from a broad sense, because of the times. We are seeing all over the state of Florida real challenges to water quality. And where we are right here is a very, very unique place. You and I today, right now, sit on the edge of the largest gulf in the world. And we are the only place in the country that has 3 national estuaries on our border. Those estuaries are in essence and in large part the nurseries for the Gulf of Mexico. We've got all kind of pressures on the Gulf. We have what is coming down from the Mississippi River. We have increased runoff. We have more and more people coming, more and more houses being built. And when we see a degradation in our coastal waters, it demands action. So that's why.
Exactly. It's an ambitious venture. Explain the mission and the goals of All Clams on Deck.
Well, you know, we all need to be able to start doing everything that we can do in our areas to work together to make the changes to deal with what's happening with climate. So what can we do here in this unique area with these 3 national estuaries, with the intrinsic resources that we have? You know, water quality issues are what keeps me up at night, but I know, and I've seen over my long time being on Anna Maria and 43 years in business, more serious threats to water quality, more harmful algal blooms, lasting longer, more pressure on it. And so we have the ability here with biological mitigation strategies around bivalves and seagrass to promote coastal resiliency, to help the health of these estuaries so that they can deal with additional nutrient loads. We're one of the best places in the world to raise clams because of the salinity level that we have and the water quality that we have. Warmer water grows clams faster. And so we have an aquaculture industry in this state that is struggling, but we need to be using bivalves which live 20, 30 years and clean water every hour of the day, every day of the year, and promote seagrass because of their waste stream and fertilize the seagrass and provide a forage fish because everything wants to eat their larvae and eat the young clams, and clean water. So this is what we are attempting to do as a giant science project. We're not claiming that we're going to cure red tide. What we are saying is let's use this unique place with the resources we have to go after the funding necessary to use this as a macro laboratory to prove out the nutrient mitigation effectiveness of bivalves and seagrass. How much nutrients can they remove? Phosphorus, nitrogen, methane, carbon, how much more seagrass importation, how much better forage fish habitat. So what we're going after is a $15 million appropriations, $5 million federal appropriations with a state match for up to $5 million in seagrass and bivalve restoration in each of the 3 national estuaries, all driven by science. That's the difference now too. I've participated, and a lot of people in this area participated in planting a lot of clams and a lot of scallops. I'm not going to put one more clam in the water and we raised $100,000 at Sarasota Baywatch last Saturday for over $100,000 for what I hope will be 1.5 million clams that get planted. And that project and every project in what we're calling All Clams on Deck and everything that we're going to do from now on is going to have the science as a basis of what we do, so that you can get the data necessary to take this money to prove the effect and the efficiency of a biological mitigation strategy that will provide great seafood and great jobs, and do that while cleaning water and protecting the precious environment and protecting our homes, values, and the values of our area and the economy of our area. If we can show those and we can get that data, we think we can leverage that money, and that 15 million can become 150 million, and we can show other people in other areas how they can use their intrinsic resources to deal with these issues that we are facing with our environment.
Well, you sure talked about the scope. Talk about what partners are involved with this.
Well, we've had great partners for a long time. We started Solutions to Avoid Red Tide to work on harmful algal bloom issues 6 years ago, 1997, after the 95-96 outbreak. So we've worked with FWC, we've worked with Moat for many years. Manatee County is a great partner. The Port of Manatee is a great partnership. We're working with a lot of the conservation organizations and a lot of the fishing captains. You know, when you sit down and you talk to people and you tell them about this project, it's sticky. People get it. People want to see this done in our area with the resources we have. So I'm optimistic. We have a federal lobbying team of 4 people that are working on this full time now. We've got the social media sites all set up, our Facebook and our Instagram, and I want to ask your listeners to please go on All Clams on Deck. All they have to do is Google All Clams on Deck. Please lend your name to this effort, lend your company logo to this effort. If you want to give a few bucks, we'd love to have you have some skin in the game, but please support this effort and get on board and be talking to your policymakers and your friends and spreading the word about what we're trying to do here.
This is not the only project that uses bivalves and like clams and oysters. What are some of the best practices in our country and around the world?
Well, you know what? That's very interesting, and I'm so glad that you asked that question, because what we're doing right here and the resources that we have right here lend themselves to that. We have the biggest bivalve seed hatchery in the Southeast. So the majority of the seeds from Maryland all the way to from Alabama come from bay shellfish. So we have one of the top people that knows how to do this on both aquaculture and restoration. We started the Gulf Shellfish Institute 7 years ago now, and we have been successful in getting grants and promoting best practices aquaculture. We've got 1 million acres of shellfish approved waters in the state, and only 1/4% are leased, so we've got a lot of runway here. And what we're doing with the All Clams on Deck project through the diatome initiative, and I don't want to get too deep into the jug on this, but is new technology, is new methodology for high density plantings, where you plant under tarps for over 1.5 years or 2 years. They stay under there so their predators stay from predators, because everything wants to eat small clams. That's a good thing for forage fish. And that you plant multiple different sizes at multiple different times to give yourself multiple runways to see what works and what doesn't work. We're using DNA now, and we will have a spawn in the All Clams on Deck project and the project that we're trying to do in Anna Maria. So people out in Anna Maria, please talk to your council people about supporting the bivalve restoration project there. But we can now take the parents of both sexes of the clam and create a spawn, which is what they will, Gulf Shellfish Institute will be involved in the diatome initiative, to put 1 million clams into this restoration that you know the sex, the genes, the DNA of the mother and the father. So you'll be able to tell if that clam is found 5 miles away or 10 miles away or 5 years away, you're gonna have that data. Radioisotopes is another thing that they have now, where we can track clams, because we need to be doing clams for restoration, and we need to be replanting them in other areas, because once they get sexually mature, a year and a half old, take them out from the nets or the bags. They are predator proof, they are hard shelled, they're going to spawn multiple times a year, and those can be restoration clams. So you're going to see a lot of new technology that comes out of this initiative to help prove out the efficacy of this project.
Right, because I've been reading about work they're doing at Woods Hole, and then there's something, I forget, I don't know if it was Denmark, or they're doing something like this. It's really interesting to see how this works with that.
And for those of your viewers that want to learn more about this, there was a new study that came out of the Whitney Lab and University of Florida IFAS. Todd Osborne is one of the foremost, if not the premier, bivalve expert in Florida, and out of the Whitney Lab, and he is doing all the Super Clam project and the other projects in the Indian River Lagoon.
Yeah.
He's not only a marine biologist, but he's a chemist as well, and that's a very unique combination. And they are having some really new data come forward and some great success. And if they go on and they look at Todd Osborne, Florida Oceanographic Society presentation, this just dropped last week. It's about an hour, but there's tremendous information in there on the efficacy, on the nutrient mitigation levels, on how they are importing seagrass, on how they are spreading in the Indian River Lagoon, which, as we all know, has the worst problem probably in the state.
Exactly. Finally, you once told me, I think last time you were here, I asked you what keeps you up at night. It's clean water. What keeps you up at night about all clams on deck?
Getting it done. You know, we're this hiring and this initiative is not just about this year. I'm an optimist, so I hope we get it this year, and I hope we get the state match. And we're going to go to municipalities, and we think everybody ought to have skin in the game. We've done 2 projects in Braden Beach, and I hope we're going to do one in Anna Maria. But it is, we're going to, if we don't get it this year, we'll be there next year. And there is a lot of information coming out and a lot of tension now on water. People have never been more concerned about water. You know that. Policymakers want to be able to say what they're doing about this. So I'm going to be at this a while. And I'm going to keep climbing the hill. And I'm going to keep trying to spread the word and beating the drum. And I think we're going to be successful in it.
Ed has been an enthusiastic voice for clean water for a long time. Clams on Deck is an innovative piece of the solution. But unfortunately, groups like Ed's are not enough. People, businesses, and even governments do not always follow environmental laws. That's when our next guest, Suncoast Waterkeeper founder Justin Bloom, steps in. We last spoke about Piney Point. Suncoast Waterkeeper was part of the lawsuit against Governor DeSantis and the State Department of Environmental Protection. What's going on with that right now?
We're kind of at a critical phase in the litigation. So yeah, it's been several months, and I think our worst fears were not realized. I'm happy to say that there was no catastrophic breach of the gyp stack there. Unfortunately, they did release 215 million gallons of highly polluted wastewater, which led to the worst red tide that we've seen in generations. But the impoundments held, and since then they've been maintaining that structure. We brought our lawsuit along with Center for Biological Diversity and our Children's Earth Foundation, and the litigation is in federal court. And just this week, we argued against the motions to dismiss the lawsuit. So we were in front of a federal judge explaining why we thought that we had every right to be in that courtroom and to proceed with this lawsuit. And we feel that the law and the facts are on our side and that we'll prevail. But the judge is going to consider all of the briefings, and so right now we have to wait and see what his decision is going to be.
What's the goal?
The goal is to have a proper, full, final, complete closure of Piney Point and a remediation. And on top of that, a lot of this is about accountability. Accountability, you mentioned that this lawsuit is against the DEP. We feel that the state has failed us here and that there needs to be accountability. It's not just DEP. We sued the governor. We also sued the owner of the facility and the Port of Manatee.
But the irony is, isn't it, that the DEP is charged with protecting our environment. So how would you rate Florida as protecting our estuaries?
I have to give them a fail. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. I think that the current DEP is an improvement. They're doing better than the DEP of a few years ago prior to DeSantis. But there's so much room for improvement. There is such a drastic need for dramatic improvement, not just on Piney Point, but across the board, because I think that we're that much further into a water crisis than we were.
How do the other partners in all this, DEP and many others, fare? Like DEP is not supposedly doing their job. What about the other partners that are involved in this with our estuaries? There are many people involved in that whole.
Sure, including you and me and everybody else. I think anybody that lives in the state of Florida, one way or the other. I think that I have to say, I think that there is a growing understanding of the importance of it, the connectivity of all these environmental and water issues. I think that there are more people in the business community and the regulated community that understand the impacts of their pollution, the need for them to improve. However, I do not see that being translated into proper regulation by the state, anywhere close to adequate enforcement by the state. I think there is more of a willingness by the regulated community to be regulated. The state now needs to step up and lead.
Well, it seems that enforcement's always the problem with any kind of policy decisions. And in this case, enforcement's quite broad.
Yeah, and I think enforcement is probably the most visible and biggest failure here.
Yeah. What other litigation is Suncoast Waterkeepers involved in right now?
Well, unfortunately, as always, we're busy. It'd be great to be without litigation. It's always a last resort. But I think maybe a good story. We're involved right now in a lawsuit, also a federal Clean Water Act citizen suit against the city of Bradenton for violation of their permit. And it's a sewage case, similar to other cases that we've brought, where they have been repeatedly discharging raw sewage and bypassing millions and millions of gallons of either raw or partially treated sewage into the Manatee River, particularly during rainy season. So they've got an old system that has been failing, and the state was not doing their job to enforce the regulations to make sure that they improve their system. We brought a case against the city, and the good story here is that they responded rapidly and very positively. Nobody welcomes a lawsuit, but they acknowledged the deficiencies. And we've been working collaboratively at a very brisk rate to resolve the issues, resolve the litigation, and I think we're on track to settling the suit. And they're on track towards fixing up their system and ultimately complying with the Clean Water Act.
What about other municipalities, other people what about Sarasota? What's going on with that?
Well, Sarasota County, we brought a major lawsuit a number of years ago, which led to their embrace of a commitment to convert their entire system to advanced wastewater treatment, which is more than they would have gotten had we won our lawsuit in court.
Right.
So they went above and beyond, and I think that they're on track to making major investments. I mean, they're making these major investments as we speak in their environmental infrastructure. So I'm really pleased that they've really embraced that. I mean, there's room for improvement in many other areas, but when it comes to their wastewater infrastructure, they are doing a great job.
What's the latest on the aquaculture? We did a show on that quite a while back. What's happening with that?
So that's that and Piney Point are both kind of looming, threats, and they're broader threats to the estuary of like all the other stormwater pollution that doesn't come from sewage spills, and we need to do a lot better on that. But the fish farm is out there. the permits that would allow that facility to operate were granted by the Army Corps and the EPA. We challenged the, we asked for reconsideration of the significant EPA permit and argued before an appellate review board in DC back in December why they should revoke that permit, reconsider the issuance of that permit. And that's been under consideration for a couple months now, so we're hoping that they will pull that permit and not allow it to go forward as planned.
Speaking of water quality, again, what we're talking about, all clams on deck. What are your thoughts on that with regard to water quality and what we're doing in our community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good name, a good phrase, all clams on deck, and because I think we're, like I said before, everybody has a stake in this. All hands on deck. Everybody needs to do their part. I think, I think, and the organization Suncoast Waterkeeper is a proponent of aquaculture. I think bivalve aquaculture in inland waterways, in the estuaries, is an excellent idea, and I would be very happy to see that succeed. I think it's part of the solution, definitely not part of the problem. And the fears that the concerns we have with are the inadequately regulated offshore aquaculture, not the estuarine project that's being promoted by all clams on deck.
So there you have it, folks. The problem: our estuaries are at a tipping point. The proof: thousands of starving manatees. The cause: crumbling infrastructure, phosphate mining, big agricultural and especially individual apathy. People just don't care. Thankfully, we have organizations and people like David and Ed and Justin. But we are losing the battle. Time is running out, and there is a point of no return. If you would like to learn more about estuaries, all clams on deck, Sarasota Bay, and other environmental efforts, go to these links. And you can always watch this episode and all our previous episodes on my website, YouTube, and Facebook. That wraps up another one. Hope you learned something and enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching. Please tell your friends about us. And until next time, I'll see you around town.
Atwell Media is a registered, not-for-profit 501c3. If you would like to support local public service programming like this, please visit our website, suzanneatwell.org, to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for watching.